Minas Gerais não é só história, é o presente e o futuro do Brasil. Eu sou Pablo Spaer, economista, e vim falar para você, empreendedor, que Minas é uma grande opção de investimento e que conta com o maior programa de formação técnica do país, o Trilhas de Futuro. Então não esqueça, na hora de investir, pense mais, pense Minas, vem pra cá, avança, Tourinho! Acesse penseminas.com.br e saiba mais. Minas Gerais, governo diferente, Estado eficiente.
This episode of The Price of Football is supported by International Sports Convention 2025, which is taking place on March the 19th and 20th at the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium. More than 1,000 delegates and 100 speakers will be attending the event, and they'll be covering a huge range of topics, from sponsorship and fan engagement to governance and integrity. Founded in 2009, International Sports Convention is the meeting place for the business of sport and has been for the last 16 years.
And there's a special treat for those lucky enough to attend the 2025 edition. The two of us will also be appearing. We'll be having a chat about football finance and governance in front of a live audience. You can book your place now at a special early offer price by going to internationalsportsconvention.com. But don't delay, that special early offer price is only available until the 20th of February.
Book your place now for International Sports Convention 2025 at Spurs Stadium on the 19th and 20th of March by going to internationalsportsconvention.com, and hopefully we'll see you there.
Tem momento na carreira que precisamos dar um passo além. É hora de fazer uma pós-graduação. Só que muitas vezes o custo pesa no bolso, inviabilizando tudo. Com a pós-graduação do Senac, você não tem esse problema. Cursos com até 50% de desconto e muito mais tempo para pagar. TCC opcional, modelo flexível com aulas presenciais e online e alguns cursos com apenas 12 meses de duração. Não tem mais desculpa, hein? Saiba mais em sp.senac.br/pós-graduação.
Hello and welcome to The Price of Football, the show that looks at the money behind the beautiful game with me, Kevin Day, and Liverpool University's Kieran Maguire. Kieran, this is one of our interviews. So we saw each other a very brief time ago. I'd say, what, about 7 seconds, would you say?
7?
Yeah.
You mentioned that number a few times today.
I thought I was remarkably restrained in previous part. It is an interview, Kieran. Those of you who are Price of Football Club members will be able to listen to this interview from Tuesday. Those of you who are not, we love you just as much. You'll be hearing this on Friday. It's an interview with Dan Hunt, who's one of the co-founders of a new Swindon Town fan group, the Spirit of 69, who are desperately trying to persuade the owner of Swindon Town to stop bidding. And here's what Dan had to say. Dan, thank you so much for joining us today. We look forward to hearing what you've got to say. But first of all, tell us just a little bit about yourself and how long you've been a Swindon Town fan.
So I am a Swindon Town fan as a result of my dad and his dad before him and his dad before him. Quite a common tale. I've been watching Swindon since I was 6 in 1994. At that point, we were in what is now the Championship. Yeah. We had just come down from the Premier League. And in a very sad way, the county ground is almost identical to what it was in 1994. Swindon have kind of been in a bit of a time warp since then and had some very well documented struggles with administration, multiple relegations, the odd flirt with something better, be that under Paolo Di Canio for 18 mad months, or looking like Mark Cooper might take us up to the promised land of the Championship again in the mid-tens. But it's generally been a school of hard knocks following Swindon for the last 30 years. And I'm now passing that on to my couple of boys who are 7 and 4 and my nephew who's 9. So that's what's the big driver for me, as well as loving Swindon Town personally and wanting this community football club to thrive. I'm doing it for that next generation young supporters who obviously I love dearly, and
Yeah.
we all just want the best for Swindon Town Football Club.
As we say about young Palace fans, we're doing it for them, whether they want it or not.
Exactly.
Basically, they're not getting to choose another team. They're not getting to choose the pub or the team. Listen, Dan, we'll talk in detail about the ownership details in a moment, but just to set the interview up, if you could briefly tell us why you set up the Spirit of 69, how many of you are there, and for younger listeners, why that name?
Okay, so we are the Spirit of 69. We are a single issue fan action group. We were launched in late November. This came days after a really humbling 3-2 defeat at home to Morecambe, which, I mean, at that time, Morecambe were bottom of the Football League. We kind of had got it back from 2-0 down to 2-2 and then threw it away again at the end. But the kind of powder keg moment was a mistake in the Swindon Town programme that day. A page talking about Swindon Town's heroes of 1969. And for our younger listeners, in 1969, in the League Cup final, third tier Swindon Town, humbled First Division Arsenal, one of the best teams in the country. One of your favourite people in the world, Kevin, Don Rogers, Swindon sort of homegrown winger, scored 2 goals so for Swindon to beat Arsenal 3-1 in extra time. So page in the programme talking about our 1969 heroes, and somehow the club used an image of QPR winning the League Cup in 1967, which, I mean, small things. And I'm going to talk about death by a thousand cuts, but that was just absolutely unforgivable. It really, coupled with the result and how badly things were going on the pitch and how bad things have been for a long time off the pitch, that was the kind of trigger moment. So myself, Rich Pullen, who's the creator of the Loathe Strangers podcast. The Loathe Strangers name is also a link back to Arsenal and Fever Pitch, a book by Nick Hornby. He referred to Swindon men with Wiltshire accents being, he'd never loathed strangers in such a way before. So our motif is a silhouette of Don Rogers skipping past Bob Wilson in that 1969 final. That's very, very emotive in itself. We've recently paid for by the Supporters Trust. We've got a Don Rogers statue now outside the county ground in Statue Park. And orange is very much a big theme as well. It's our protest colour. It's a hark back to sort of Swindon protest heritage, protested in the mid-2000s against the then owners. Where did orange come from? It was kind of a nod towards Paul Sturrock, who was the Swindon Town manager at the time, very popular man. And of course, he was a Dundee United legend. Dundee United played in all orange. But also at the time, the Ukrainian Revolution, known as the Orange Revolution, I think those couple of things combined together, orange hats, which, as our symbol, kind of became the symbol of protest in the mid-thousands. So we're doing it as a kind of hark back to our protesting heritage.
I'm trying to be generous to your comms team, because I think QPR wore an all-white kit in 1967, and you did in 1969, as I recall.
But crucially, Kevin, our lads were covered in mud.
It was the pitch was awful. Yeah. We can't get sidetracked down a Don Rogers cul-de-sac here.
We'll do that another day, Kev.
Except to say I did annoy Ian Wright and Mark Bright just before Christmas when, as ever, they tend, when they get together, they keep mentioning the fact there should be a statue of them outside the ground. And I keep mentioning the fact, well, there should be a statue of Wrighty with a statue of Brighty 10 yards behind him trying to keep up. But if there's going to be a statue of anyone at Sellers Park, it's going to be Don Rogers. So that's how you got Spirit of 69. I'm also intrigued. Could you tell us who? Because their name will come up. Trust STFC are different, aren't they? So Trust STFC are different to the owners, but they own 50% of the ground. Is that correct?
Yeah. Just before I answer that one, Kevin, I should also make a nod, as well as Rich Pullen, the founder of the Loathe Strangers podcast. Our other co-founder is Terry Pearce. Okay. I got a little sidetracked talking about Arsenal and Loathe Strangers on my previous answer. Yeah. But to come on to this question, so Swindon Town Supporters Trust are very active. Unfortunately, over the last 30 years, they've kind of had to be. Myself and Terry Pierce, my co-founder, we have both served on the Supporters Trust board at the time where we were looking to oust our last rogue owner, Lee Power. So that was about 4 or 5 years ago now. So the county ground land is owned by a joint venture, legal vehicle, and that joint venture is owned 50% by the supporters, represented by the Supporters Trust STFC, and 50% by Swindon Town Football Club. So the county ground land jointly owned via the JV. The actual bricks and mortar that sit on the land are owned by the football club, but effectively Swindon Town FC are a tenant of that land, and they pay a kind of monthly rent to the joint venture agreement. So the Supporters Trust and the football club are very closely linked in how they manage the sort of ownership of the ground. The Supporters Trust have been at pains to say in recent times that actually this closeness is a good thing. They kind of have the chairman's ear. Other people in the past have sort of said, maybe that's too close. But that's up for debate. And, the Supporters Trust, they are well-meaning, and they are, they have got the supporters' best interest at heart. What they did in response to the launch of the Spirit of 69 fan action group that we've launched back in late November, they threw their weight behind us, and they also called for ownership change at Swindon Town, which was a really big moment for us personally at the Spirit of 69, to see that kind of Swindon fan base coming back together, kind of healing and coming together against a kind of common goal that we're looking to achieve.
Yeah. Daniel, we have to be honest with you here. When Clem Morfuni took over at Swindon, both Kieran and I thought it was a good thing, because we'd covered the Lee Power situation and it wasn't pretty, and it seemed to us that he seemed like a saviour for you, and also the CEO. We had a lot of discussions with him, so it seemed like a very good, positive news story. What's gone wrong?
Yes, so I think I was with you, Kieran and Kevin. That summer that Clem Morfuni took over from Lee Power, it was very much that kind of vibe. It was a saviour. It was a fresh start. It was a chance to look forward. And actually, in that first season, a very cobbled together squad over a mad 3 or 4 weeks ahead of the season. We had Ben Chorley as the director of football, did a fantastic job. Ben Garner did a fantastic job as manager. We reached the playoffs that season. The crowds were through the roof. We had an average League Two crowd of, it was 9,800 that season. And I think this is a really important point. So the average crowds this season, 24-25, are currently tracking at 6,800. Somewhere, Clem Morfuni has lost 3,000 regular match-going fans. So while the Spirit of 69 are a very visible sort of fan action group, and we are doing what we're doing, there are thousands of Swindon fans that have voted with their feet and are protesting silently just by not turning up. And so from that first season, where there was so much goodwill for Clem Morfuni and what he was doing at Swindon, the people of the town backed the club. They turned up, they paid their money. We sold over 5,000 season tickets, again, in that mad 2 or 3 week period over the summer before the season started. Local businesses got behind the club. And so what we've seen since, in the 2 or 3 years since that first season, is just one of the most remarkable climb downs. And, we'll bang this drum until the cows come home. Systematic incompetence in how the club is run off the field. All the excuses stopped after that first season, really, once Clem Morfuni and co had been in tenure for a year. And actually, the off-field operation has got worse. We're looking at, not having able and skilled executive people running the club. the county ground, as I said to you earlier, hasn't changed since 1994. And despite the football club and the fans owning the county ground since March 2023, there's been no development. There's no realistic prospect of any redevelopment at the ground. The club are still talking a good game about putting development plans in front of Trust STFC. But frankly, that conversation just feels so abstract. And in the future, like, we've got much bigger problems at the club than trying to put executive boxes into the Don Rogers stand. So where has it gone wrong? How he runs the club is where it's gone wrong. He's pissed away so much goodwill and backing of the people of the town and the businesses of the town. And now, unfortunately for Clem Morfuni, this is very much the kind of chickens coming home to roost moment. Spirit of 69 fan action group. We're doing what we're doing. You've got those 3,000 fans that have gone away and not come back. Thankfully, Ian Holloway on the pitch seems to be polishing the turd and getting Swindon Town out of major sort of existential threat. Because a couple of months ago when we launched, that relegation trapdoor was looking very scary indeed.
It's interesting, though, that those 3,000 missing fans you talk about, and I have to say as well, Selhurst Park hasn't changed since 1994, but what has changed is that we're in the Premier League, so that helps.
And you're not sharing it with Wimbledon.
Absolutely so. But so even though Ian Holloway has, it seems, turned you into an upwardly mobile club, those fans are still not coming back. Yeah,
it's going to be a long time to turn the ship around, as it were. What Ian Holloway has given us is some much needed stability on the field. And now hopefully, looking ahead for the rest of the season and into the summer, hopefully we can have some managerial and squad stability and continuity, which is something we've not had for going on years now. But actually, what Ian Holloway is doing on the field, we argue, is in spite of what is happening in the off-field operation. We don't think we've seen any improvement since the launch of the Spirit of 69 fan action group. There has been, there is an owner, Clem Morfuni, who seems to be quite entrenched. He's been quite dismissive of the Spirit of 69 in his sort of public utterances. There was one line back in December that really rankled with me, and that was protesting about what? And then that's my joy then, when I can come out and say, well, we'll tell you what we're protesting about, Clem Morfuni. It's a lack of professionalism, pride and care behind the scenes at Swindon Town. It's a lack of able and skilled people at executive level. You had a really high profile moment a couple of years ago where Clem Morfuni was outed by Companies House confirmation statement. He'd actually sold 22.5% of the club to Chris Kiley and his wife Holly Kiley. He didn't see fit to communicate this to anyone. And I think that was the beginning of the end for the then chief exec, Rob Angus. He's my friend and former Supporters Trust colleague. He became a bit of a lamb to the slaughter, a sort of poorly timed fans forum later on that same day. We've spoken about, that first season, all of the goodwill. We actually turned over an operating profit in that first season. And now we're in a situation where we have rising outgoings that are unable to be explained by Clem Morfuni's chief executive, Anthony Hall. We've mentioned the average crowds running at below 7,000. I think that silent protest from the 3,000, that's really powerful. And the Supporters Trust recently spoke about the unsustainability of Clem Morfuni having to fund that gap of circa £1 to £1.5 million a year. And actually, there is a danger at Swindon that the club become too indebted to Clem Morfuni, and that makes it too difficult to sell.
Doing my research, people are often surprised to hear I do research it, Dan, but looking
I'm
at
not.
looking at the local press in December, reporting that Clem Morfuni was expected to put his hand in his pocket and fund transfers in this window. Has that happened?
Well, famous last words. It's transfer deadline day today as we're
Yeah.
recording. So there may well be a flurry of business later today. But at the time of recording, we have signed 2 loan players in the month of
Right.
January.
Okay.
So I think right now you could say, no, Ian Holloway hasn't been back to the hilt. I don't think what you've just referred to there has transpired, no.
I want to come in a moment, Dan, to your express aims, your specific aims with the Spirit of 69. But before that, I'd like to bring Kieran in, because Kieran has been across Swindon from the start of the pod, essentially. So I'd like to know, Kieran, if you echo what Dan's saying, do you have the same concerns about the money Clem Morfuni's putting into the side, whether it's enough? If Clem Morfuni could be persuaded to sell, how much do you think Swindon Town would be worth, and are they a viable going concern?
If I sort of answer those questions in reverse order, yes, they are a viable club because a new owner, I think, will spark greater interest. As Dan said, there's been a lack of professionalism at the club. In terms of the price, I've had conversations with people who have asked me sort of close questions about Swindon Town, and the constant thing that comes through is that I think Clem Morfuni has lost money as owner of the club, and he wants to recoup that, and he's going to try to recoup that in terms of the price that he's asking. I've heard that price is £12 million. On the basis of the numbers that I'm seeing, club's not worth it. And trying to get him to see sense, it could be that he has funded his investment in the club externally, so therefore he has external debt which he has to deal with himself. We don't know the intricacies of that, and therefore, to a certain extent, he's caught between 2 issues here. A, does he want to get rid of the club? Yes. B, can he afford to get rid of the club at an appropriate price? I think he's got to take a hit, and there's things that I can't say. There's things that Dan can't say that wouldn't be appropriate. But there is a cause for concern. So the club's finances. I've got the 2023 accounts. The club's effectively broke even through player sale, bonuses, and so on. But the underlying losses are concerning, and with the drop in attendances, club costs going up, as all costs for businesses are going up, that's going to mean that there's a deficit.
If Clem Morfuni stays as the owner, Kieran, how long do you think it would be until Swindon end up on your at-risk list?
Whilst he's continuing to subsidise the losses, then effectively they're on amber,
Right.
because does he have unlimited resources? I don't think he's as wealthy as perhaps we thought when he bought the club, and there were certainly legacy issues from the reign of Lee Power, again, which you can go down a wormhole and come out of it 5 hours later, and we've still not scratched the surface there. So he looked like an upgrade. I always say that struggling clubs, the owners are either mad or bad. I don't think he's bad. I think he's just got himself into a situation where he's not familiar with how to run the business. He's relied on some people that he shouldn't have. The people he should have relied on are no longer at the club. And you put those 3 things together and it's a mess.
So finally, Kieran, before we go back to Dan, is this a classic example of somebody coming in from the outside world without any real understanding of the realities of running a football club and the financial implications?
Yeah, do your due diligence.
Yeah.
And if you don't, then then you've got to be prepared to take the consequences. And I don't think he necessarily is the wealth or the wherewithal to deal with those consequences.
Dan, we know from talking to other Swindon fans as well as listening to you now, we know that he's incredibly reluctant to engage with you. There's a general lack of communication, full stop. But does he show any sign of actually wanting to sell, being close to selling? Or is this lack of engagement just the stubbornness that we often see from other football club owners?
Mm-hmm. Well, publicly anyway, he's not said anything on record about selling the club. As I said earlier, he's been quite dismissive of our group and our aims. And, on that, Spirit of 69 Fan Action Group, we are a single issue group, and that is, Clem Morfuni, please acknowledge the systematic incompetence that you have shown in running Swindon Town Football Club over the last 2 or 3 years. List the club for sale and, actually follow through on that promise of selling the club. So until such time, then we will be active as a group protesting for him to do that.
Would you hope to have any meetings with potential new owners just to share your concerns with them?
I don't think we want to play in that field. I think what we can do at the Spirit of 69 is organise protest, show the strength of feeling that is out there. And actually what we had with our first day of action on the 21st of December against Grimsby Town, we had, and these are numbers verified by the police, we had between 500 and 600 Swindon Town fans decked out in orange hats and orange banners and orange everything, marching from about half a mile away to the ground. And then we had a protest rally at Statue Park in and around the statue of Don Rogers. So that was a really, really good start for us to show that strength of feeling. And actually that day, it was a filthy, filthy weather day as well. So I fear that may have knocked 100 or 200 people off. What we have coming this weekend against Port Vale on Saturday with the early kickoff, we are organising our second day of action. So we're having a post-match protest at the back of the main stand, straight after the game, trying to bring that message and the noise and that strength of feeling straight to the club's front door. So at the back of the Arkle stand, that's the kind of club reception area, it's the function rooms, it's the hospitality areas, boardrooms, etc. So, given our efforts so far have been met with dismissive kind of messages, given that Clem Morfuni still hasn't listed the club for sale, then we have no choice but to try and bring that protest closer to the front door. What I would say moving forwards is actually the closer Swindon get to mid-table safety and that relegation trapdoor is no longer a threat, I think that actually gives us a chance to be a bit more creative, a bit more disruptive as a protest group, without that kind of jeopardy of jeopardising what's happening on field and what that might lead to. Our stance so far has absolutely been for the 90 minutes that you're in the ground. If you're wearing your orange hat, if you dislike the ownership, get behind the team. And something we're really happy with actually is from that 21st of December first day of action game onwards, the energy in the ground seems to have increased. Even with the lower crowd. So it feels like a kind of a coming together of the fan base. The results since then, we've had 5 home wins and 1 home draw.
Yeah.
So, that's 16 points out of 18 since we started the Spirit of 69. And we've even won 2 away games on the trot, which is just, we're kind of pinching ourselves over here. We've had a really miserable couple of years away from home. So one little tagline we're using at the moment, owing to the song from my youth, 99 problems, but on the pitch ain't one.
Nice. Yeah. Best not to mention away games at the moment, Dan, in front of Kieran, if that's all right.
If it makes you feel any better, Kieran, I once went to the City Ground and saw Swindon concede 7.
Are you able to tell us, Dan, what other protest plans you might have for the future, or would you rather keep them as a surprise?
Well, we'll be keeping them up our sleeves for now. I
Okay.
think the best result, frankly, because me, Rich, and Terry, we're just three normal guys. We've all got young families. We've got full-time jobs on our plate. We'd rather not be doing this.
Yeah, yeah,
And so the power is in Clem Morfuni's hands. Listen to the strength of feeling in the fan base. List the club for sale. And, as a custodian, which he is, and those were his words when he took over, he is the current custodian of our community football club. Act responsibly, sell the club responsibly, and give us a chance to thrive for the next generation of fans. Because as it happens, right now, this is a club that off the field is going absolutely nowhere. On the field, you're seeing Ian Holloway doing a fantastic job with what is essentially Mark Kennedy's squad plus a couple of loanees. But nothing is going to improve off the field until a whole host of things change. Which I've mentioned for this pod. I won't list them again, but
sure. With the orange hats, Dan, obviously that's a very visible sign of anger and support for you. Are you confident, though, that most Swindon Town fans share your view, or are there still people who go, "Well, hang on a second, we're going to be safe from relegation. This guy, it seems well-meaning enough. Let's see what he has to say."
So I think when we launched this, it was very much we knew colloquially the strength of feeling that was out there. We're sort of Swindon Town fans on the ground. We're regular podcasters talking about Swindon Town. We see that kind of feedback loop. And so what I'm sure we have, and what I'm sure that the first day of action on the 21st of December showed, is that we have a critical mass. And I think the way we've conducted ourselves as a group has shown that actually we're not just kind of keyboard warriors. We're pretty serious people. We can organise events. We can do messaging. We're good at comms. Put that up against Swindon Town's sort of quality of communications. It's quite a contrast. What I definitely think we've seen in the last 2 or 3 weeks is actually with the club doing better on the field, for some of the people in that kind of fringe, in the wider fan base, supporting us or not, the kind of neutral, is actually the on the pitch stuff. It clearly does have a bigger effect on other people, and that's our job then, as the Spirit 69, is to keep highlighting the incompetence, keep highlighting the lack of professionalism, the lack of care, keep banging the drum about our rundown and tired home. That should be home, right? That should be something we're looking after. You got people in the town end walking through piss-soaked floors. You've had recent events where Swindon Town have gone viral. Birmingham female fan in the away end in mid-January looks up and sees a CCTV camera looking down on her. That ended up getting millions of views on social media. Little things. The club became aware of that CCTV issue last year, but it took them being shamed by going viral to actually do anything about it. They've now put some cheap-looking MDF up to remedy it. And just that kind of death by 1,000 cuts, like other really tiny things, like a sign up at a recent home game, due to a national shortage of Bovril, we're unable to serve Bovril. Like, you Google it, there's no national shortage of Bovril. So, someone is just telling a porcupine that. But again, people will argue that's a really small thing. But when it's the 1,000th small cut, it all adds up.
It's a small thing to somebody who's not a football fan.
Yeah.
But to somebody who is a football fan, and we all want to be proud of our football club and what they do. And of course, there's no such thing as a perfect football club, but for the most part, you just want to go, that's a good thing. When we discuss clubs opening their ground for Christmas so people can come in and you just go, that makes you feel better about your club. Little things like that. And simple things like the CCTV camera and the Bovril camera, you just go, for that's sake.
Exactly.
I'd be interested. Apparently, we were told there was a national Guinness shortage just before Christmas as well, which caused ripples of panic in the
Yeah,
Portsmouth
we
Arms.
probably caused that one, Kev, between
Are
us. Yeah.
there? Are there? I've got two questions for you, Dan, to finish. Is there a resolution to this problem that doesn't involve Clem Morfuni selling? If Clem Morfuni was to say, "Look, I've listened to that interview on the price of football. I think you've made a lot of valid points there. Let's talk. Let's see how you can help us improve what we're doing as a club. But as it happens, I don't want to sell, but I think we can do things better." Would that be enough for you, or is the only outcome that you'd be satisfied with new ownership? Because as Kieran's often said in the past, sometimes be careful what you wish for, because the new owners are not necessarily going to be better than the old ones.
Yeah, and I go back to my comments about Clem Morfuni being the current custodian of a really important community asset. It's my football club. It's not his. He's the man whose name's above the door currently. So he has a responsibility to sell responsibly. Definitely. You're right. The next owners could be rotters. That's not in our control, but that doesn't mean that we shouldn't roll the dice. My own personal view, I don't think there is a viable future with Clem Morfuni in charge of Swindon Town Football Club. Okay. I think if he is going to dig his heels in and stay, then we risk, to what Kieran was saying earlier, about the club becoming too indebted to him to ever be sold in a sort of meaningful way. I think that's a large risk, and the Supporters Trust have spoken about that recently as well. So no, I think the only resolution is for Clem Morfuni to sell the club and give us a chance of thriving in the next 5 or 10 years. He hasn't reached out to us at the Spirit 69, and nor are we caught in that conversation. I think it would be a really simple conversation, frankly. Hi, Clem, please sell the club. Please list the club for sale. Yeah. If he says no, well, then we're at loggerheads as we continue to be.
My final question, Dan, has been slightly anticipated by Kieran saying that the club is probably up for sale for £12 million, which is an astonishingly high figure for a League Two club, and much more than I expected. Because I was going to ask whether one of the potential resolutions was off the back of the Swindon Town Trust already owning half the ground, that perhaps a fan-owned situation would be possible, but I can't see any situation in which fans would be able to raise £12 million to buy the club from Clem Morfuni.
No, I think because of the numbers involved, unless some lucky bugger in Swindon is going to win the Euro Millions, I think that is out of reach for the time being. And that's partly because when Clem Morfuni took over the club, I think he inherited sort of £6 or £7 million worth of debt from the Lee Power era. Yeah. One myth I would like to bust, and we get this thrown at us quite a lot in the last couple of months, is, Clem Morfuni came in, he cleared the debt. Well, no, he didn't. Right. Yeah, that debt is now owed to him. And he brags about not charging interest on that. Brilliant. But ultimately, when the club comes to be sold, it's probably at sort of 8 or 9 million now. That first 8 or 9 million is going to him. So that sweetener on top, if it is £12 million that's being asked for, that's the sweetener. But I do think there is that really big inherent risk that Swindon Town, like a club like Colchester now, for example, I think the owner is owed something like £30 million, almost becomes unsellable. And then you're in that kind of death spiral. We've seen how Clem Morfuni runs a football club in the last 3 or 4 years. It would be the greatest comeback since Jesus Christ at Easter if Clem was to correct all of those things that I've mentioned on the pod today. It's not happening. I'm sorry, folks.
Sorry, Kieran. I saw you nodding vigorously at mention of Colchester there. Kieran, is there anything you'd like to say to us?
No, Dan's absolutely right. I think it's one of the things which we've mentioned before. Some of the clubs, which I suspect fly under the radar because they don't get a lot of national attention, are hugely indebted. And then it becomes a case of you either stick with the current owner, or the current owner, if they've reached that point of, I don't want to put good money after bad, writes off huge amounts of debt. Whether they can afford to, and this is my concern with Clem Morfuni, and I think Dan knows exactly where I'm coming from here. I don't think he can afford to write off a large amount of debt, because potentially his wealth, or his perceived wealth, perhaps isn't as high as the Swindon fan base and other independent people thought it was at the time.
Dan, I was going to say it's been a pleasure, Dan. It's not most of our interviews. I wish we didn't have to do most of our interviews, to be
Precisely.
perfectly honest. But it has been a pleasure to talk to you and to put some meat on the bones and to hear your passion. And we will do that Don Rogers Sports Shop special podcast eventually. We have reached out to Swindon Town and Clem Morfuni, because in all situations like this, we feel it's only fair to try and hear both sides of the story. You may or may not be surprised to hear that we've not had a response from.
I'm not surprised.
From Swindon Town or Clem Morfuni, but we want to hear what they have to say, because we think that's only fair. Because
absolutely,
as I said right at the start, it did seem like a unqualified good news story.
Yeah,
but it really
if you want a closer, if you want to understand the type of people that are running our community football club at the moment, there was. In the recent Supporters Trust newsletter of a couple of weeks ago, a story in there about how the ball boys and girls who work at Swindon Town, they're supplied by the Swindon Town Community Foundation, sort of a separate entity to Swindon Town Football Club. They do fantastic work across the town. The ball boys and girls used to get a hot drink and a bit of food from the kiosks, no questions asked. Those ball boys and girls have now been told by Swindon Town Football Club, you have to buy your own hot drinks and food. And that is what we're dealing with here. We have got volunteers who are minors volunteering their time to help the football club out. And they are not being treated with respect, and they're not being treated with dignity. And if that's how you're treating your ball boys and girls, how do you think they're treating the people they don't like, you know?
It's another of those 1,000 cuts, isn't it? That just get under your skin. Danny, nice to talk to you.
Thank you both.
Hopefully, in months to come, we'll get you back on to discover some good news. In the meantime, look after yourself. Enjoy the rest of the season. And Ian Holloway and his shenanigans. Which Ian Holloway shenanigans. When he's your manager, you love Ian Holloway. When he's not your manager, how did I ever love that? See you later. Thanks, Dan. Bye-bye now.
Thank you.
Cheers, Dan.
I mean, the fact that it started because the comms department at Swindon put a photograph of QPR in the cup final, not a photograph of Swindon in the cup final, they're the sort of little things that fans will notice. I have to say, Kieran, I was very surprised at the value you think Clem Morfuni's put on the club. £12 million for a League Two club is an awful lot of money, isn't it?
It is, and given that the Supporters Trust owns half of the stadium, so you're not getting the full issue there. I have spoken to one or two people who they could be tire kickers for all I know, but rightly or wrongly, you do get phone calls and WhatsApp messages and so on saying, if you were to buy Swindon Town, and £12 million, it's probably not worth it. It's as simple as that. And it comes down, if you sell in a house, if you think it's worth 12 million and the buyers doesn't, then it doesn't get sold. I do fear that Clem Morfuni has got in. He's got into something which he wasn't familiar with. He's got into further debt as a result of that, and he's trying to get his money back. And sometimes you've got to say, actually, getting out now and not having to subsidise the club for so many months going forwards is actually a better deal.
Yeah, my fear is, of course, I fully understand and support the aims of the spirit of 69, Kieran, but my theory is you end up in and they will very much hate me for saying this, but you end up in a Reading situation where you have an owner who possibly does want to sell, but when the spirit of 69 say that's the only option that we'll accept is him selling the club, you're going to get people who stick their heels in and say, well, I decide when I sell the club, not a group of fans. So having no other option, I think, is sometimes not the best thing to do, as we've seen with Reading fans, who it seems that everything Reading fans do just makes Dai Yonga that more determined not to sell the bloody club.
Some people can take a very obstinate approach. At the same time, if I was that owner, I'm not popular. I've got something which is costing me a fortune every week. Why on earth am I doing this? Because in all relationships that go bad, you realise a point that there is no comeback, and sometimes it's best just to cut your losses.
Yeah, very good news to hear that Don Rogers still has his sports shop in Swindon, though.
Excellent, absolutely.
A fixed point in an ever-changing world. We'll do a Don Rogers podcast one day. What a player he was. I loved him so much. Don't forget, you can now join our Price of Football Club. We will get ad-free listening, bonus episodes and more, as well as hearing interviews before everybody else does, of course. You can go to priceoffootball.com, click on Join the Club to sign up today. But one important thing to be aware of, if you're not one of our wonderful Patreon subscribers, or if you are one of them, I should say, your membership will not transfer over automatically if you sign up to the new club. You'll need to cancel your Patreon subscription and set up a new one using the link on the website. We'll be turning off the Patreon offering at the end of February. If you have a question you'd like answered on the show, email us at questions@priceoffootball.com. You can follow us on X, and you can find us on YouTube. And if you'd like to buy our book, you can find details on our website, priceoffootball.com. We'll be back on, well, it depends when you're listening to this interview, Kieran. For the Price of Football Club members,
We'll be back.
We'll be back. Yeah, just leave it at that, Kieran. We'll be back. Bye, everybody.
Bye.
The Price of Football. The Price of Football.